The night started with laughter, wine, and the kind of energy that fills a room when people believe they've done something worth celebrating. We'd hit our quarterly goals at Silvermore Industries, beating projections by a wide margin, and our division was riding high. Logistics isn't glamorous, but when it runs right, it saves millions. So we were rewarded with a company-sponsored dinner at La Rouse, one of those high-end, dimly lit restaurants with waiters who glide and menus without prices. Clarice looked radiant in her navy dress, the neckline just shy of conservative, her hair pinned up with a single diamond clip she'd told me she bought on clearance, though everything about it screamed boutique. She was beaming, attentive, laughing at the right jokes, sipping a Bordeaux I couldn't pronounce. I was proud to be beside her. 7 years married, and in that moment, it felt like we were still solid. We sat near the head of the table, next to Mr. Greer, our CEO, who had a reputation for being both eccentric and ruthlessly intelligent. He always looked half amused, like life itself was an elaborate game he'd already mastered. I'd had maybe 2 brief conversations with him in the last year, both polite, both forgettable. But tonight he seemed relaxed, pleased. His silver cufflinks caught the candlelight as he lifted his glass, addressing the group with a practiced charm. To Silvermore Logistics, he said. To the team that keeps the wheels turning and the profits flowing. A collective cheer followed, and glasses clinked all around. Clarice gave my hand a quick squeeze beneath the table. I smiled at her, feeling that warm swell of shared accomplishment. And then Mr. Greer turned toward me, smile unwavering, voice casual. Milo, is the $4,500 monthly performance bonus treating you well? It took me half a second to register the question, then another half to decide how to respond. I laughed, a confused chuckle. What kind of money? I said, thinking it was a joke. Maybe a test. The kind of test where everyone else is in on it, and you just play along. But the moment I asked, the entire table shifted. Not physically. Emotionally. The laughter stopped. Forks paused midair. Someone 2 seats down coughed awkwardly. Clarice's hand slipped from mine. She didn't say anything, not right away. She stared straight ahead, eyes wide. I turned toward her instinctively. Her face had gone pale, lips pressed together like a child caught sneaking out after curfew. Her wine glass trembled slightly as she reached for it, then hesitated. Mr. Greer's expression didn't change. He leaned back slowly, folded one hand over the other, and said, interesting. Just that one word, dragged out like a scalpel sliding free from its case. I looked around, trying to read the room, but no one would meet my eyes. Not my manager. Not the director. Even the waiter who had just brought our entrees turned abruptly, sensing something in the air he wanted no part of. Clarice finally cleared her throat, her voice lighter than it had any right to be. Oh, it's probably just a payroll mix-up, she said, brushing imaginary lint from her sleeve. You know how those things go. She gave a nervous laugh, like it might be enough to reset the room. But it wasn't. Mr. Greer didn't press further. He didn't have to. His silence carried more weight than any accusation could. He simply stood and excused himself from the table, nodding at someone near the bar. Less than 5 minutes later, Samantha Baird, the HR director, walked in. Her stride was purposeful, clipboard in hand. She didn't smile, didn't greet the table. She made a straight line to where I sat and placed a sealed folder next to my water glass. We thought it was odd you never acknowledged your quarterly bonus, she said quietly, professionally. Especially since it's been consistent for over a year. Clarice shifted beside me, her hand now curled into a fist in her lap. I opened the folder slowly, my fingers not quite steady. Inside were copies of company financials, bonus ledgers, direct deposit slips, all itemized, all showing a $4,500 monthly transfer, none of them into my account. I flipped the page. There, bold, cold, unmistakable, was Clarice's name, her signature, her routing number. The money had gone directly into her personal account, categorized under shared household deposit. I sat there for a long moment, the room spinning in that low, nauseating way it does when your body realizes something your mind can't yet accept. My first reaction wasn't anger. It was disbelief. She handled our finances, always had. Said it made things easier. Efficient. She had a spreadsheet for everything. Groceries. Utilities. Travel. I trusted her. Implicitly. And now I felt like a fool in a tailored shirt. I looked at her, slowly. She didn't meet my eyes. She just stared at the table, like she wanted to disappear inside the linen. My voice came out softer than I expected. Is this true? I asked. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just the quiet question of a man who'd suddenly realized he didn't know his own life. She turned toward me then, blinking fast. "Milo, please," she said, barely audible. "Not here." "But where, then? Where do you discuss something like this? A lie that had lived inside your own house, wrapped in receipts and silence?" My chair scraped the floor as I stood, gathering the folder without a word. I didn't need to finish the meal. The taste in my mouth was ash. Clarice rose too, smoothing her dress like it might fix everything. "Let's talk outside," she whispered. I nodded once, stiffly. We walked through the quiet restaurant, every step echoing. Behind us, no one spoke. Not a soul. Just the low hum of whispered judgment and 100 eyes burning holes into our backs. And that's how it began. Clarice tried to laugh. It wasn't a confident laugh, not the kind I'd heard her use when smoothing over awkward family dinners or defending budgets in boardroom meetings. This one was strained, brittle, the laugh of someone cornered and grasping for a version of reality they could control. "It's probably just a payroll mix-up," she said, voice too high, too quick. "Accounting sends those bonus memos out late sometimes. You know that." She gestured toward the folder Samantha had left by my water glass, as if it might sprout legs and run away before I opened it. But I had already opened it. The contents were too precise to be a mix-up. The first page was a summary, for $1,500 per month for the past 12 months. The deposit log was detailed down to the hour. Page 2 was even worse, screenshots from our payroll system, showing the bonuses assigned to me, approved by management, processed by accounting, processed by Clarice. Her login credentials were at the top right corner of each page. The final pages included bank routing information that matched an account I didn't even know existed. An account under her name alone. I sat still. My chest was tight, and the voices around the table blurred into meaningless noise. I wasn't humiliated yet. That would come later. In that moment, I was just stunned, trying to remember how we got here. How I could be sitting next to someone I had trusted with every part of my life, my finances, my time, my secrets, only to realize I didn't even know what bank accounts existed under my own roof. Mr. Greer had left the restaurant with his usual quiet presence, but now the air he left behind felt denser. The entire table was watching us, not with cruelty but with curiosity, the kind you reserve for car wrecks and courtroom dramas. I couldn't sit there. Not anymore. I closed the folder with a slow breath, wiped my hands on the cloth napkin, and stood up. "Excuse me," I said. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. Clarice's eyes widened, and she reached for my arm. "Milo, wait. Don't make this a scene." A scene. That was her concern. Not the lie. Not the betrayal. The scene. "I need air," I said, pulling my arm gently from her grip. I didn't walk fast. I didn't storm off. I just moved, one step at a time, past rows of elegant couples enjoying overpriced meals, past the wine cart and the entryway, until I stepped out into the cool night. The air hit me hard, brisk against the heat building in my skin. My jaw clenched, my hands balled into fists and released again. I didn't want to break down, not here. Not in the valet circle of a restaurant filled with my coworkers and a wife I didn't know how to look at. I just stood there, trying to decide whether this was something I could walk away from or something that would follow me forever. The door behind me opened a moment later, and Clarice stepped out. Her heels clicked on the pavement as she approached, clutching her purse like a shield. "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice gentler now. I turned slightly, but didn't face her. "So talk." She let out a shaky breath. "Look, it's not what you think." I laughed. I actually laughed. "Then tell me what I'm thinking, Clarice. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've been pocketing money behind my back for a year." Her expression flinched, like I'd struck her. "It's not stealing," she said. "It's reallocating. I moved it to the household fund." "Household fund." I turned fully now. "What household fund?" "We have a joint account. You manage the bills." "Yes, but this wasn't that. This was your personal account, labeled under your name. No access, no visibility. How is that a household fund?" She looked like she wanted to argue, but her lips just parted and closed again. "I was going to tell you," she said quietly. "Eventually." I stared at her. "Eventually? You mean after you drained everything you could and moved on?" "No." She snapped, then lowered her voice. "Milo, come on. Don't say things like that. Then explain it. Explain how every bonus I earned ended up in your private account without so much as a conversation. And don't say payroll mix-up again. Samantha's folder says otherwise." Clarice crossed her arms, eyes darting to the side, like she was weighing which version of the truth would hurt least. I didn't think you'd know what to do with that kind of money, she said finally, like she was offering me a gift. I blinked. What? You're brilliant with logistics, Milo, but finances? Long-term planning? You don't care about that stuff. You never have. You'd probably blow it on tech toys or vacation ideas we'd never take. I was just organizing it. Organizing. I stepped back, genuinely afraid of what else she might try to rebrand. That's what we're calling it now. She reached for my hand, but I didn't move. Milo, I was trying to protect us. I swear, this wasn't malicious. But it was secret, I said. It was deceitful. You didn't even tell me when the bonuses started. Not once. You just rerouted them like I was a liability to be managed. Silence stretched between us. Her eyes were glassy, but no tears fell. I didn't think they would. Clarice was too practiced for that. Too controlled. What do you want me to say? She asked finally, voice cracking. I looked at her for a long moment. The woman I married was standing in front of me, but she felt like a stranger. 7 years together, and I couldn't recall the last time we talked about money with any real honesty. Maybe she had always seen me as someone to manage instead of trust. Maybe I had allowed that. I don't want you to say anything, I said. Not right now. Her face tightened. So what? You're just going to walk away. I'm going to take a breath, I replied. And then I'm going to figure out where my money is, where my name fits into any of this, and what else you've been organizing behind my back. She looked like she might protest again, but instead, she nodded, once, sharply, then turned back toward the restaurant. I stayed outside for another 10 minutes. The night air had cooled further, and I could hear faint music from the patio. Laughter. Silverware clinking against porcelain. Life was moving on, as if none of this had just ruptured. As if my world hadn't just shifted on its axis in front of 20 people and a half-eaten steak. The restaurant door opened again. I expected Clarice, but it was someone else. Mr. Greer. He approached me slowly, hands in his pockets. May I speak with you privately, Milo? I nodded. No hesitation. Just a tired, hollow motion. Yes, please. And with that, I followed him away from the restaurant, away from the watching eyes, away from Clarice. I didn't know what was coming next. But I knew it had already started. The hallway outside La Rouse was narrow and dimly lit, lined with overpriced modern art that no one ever really looked at. I stood there, facing the emergency exit sign, the faint hum of distant conversation bleeding through the walls. My heart was still trying to find its rhythm. I could feel the weight of the sealed file in my hand, heavier than paper should be. I didn't want to see her, not yet. But I knew she'd follow me. Clarice always did when things started to slip beyond her control. Sure enough, I heard the soft click of her heels a few moments later. She stepped out quietly, the door closing behind her with a soft hush that sounded more final than it should have. She didn't say anything right away. Neither did I. We just stood there, surrounded by silence and the cold glow of industrial light fixtures. I turned slowly to face her. How long? I asked. It was a plain question. Not angry, not accusing. Just a man asking something he should have never needed to ask his wife. She opened her mouth, probably to lie first. Her lips formed the beginning of a word, then stopped. Her shoulders dropped just slightly. Then she whispered, since the 2nd year of our marriage. I blinked. 2 years in. That meant 5 years of pretending. 5 years of bonuses rerouted, accounts hidden, and conversations avoided. My hand tightened around the file. Why? Clarice looked away, as if the answer was etched somewhere in the shadows of the hallway. I didn't think you'd know what to do with that kind of money. The words didn't make sense at first. They entered my ears like static. What kind of money? I asked, my voice rising. She gestured vaguely, like it was all obvious. Bonuses. Extra income. Large deposits. You always said money made you anxious. You hate managing it. I stared at her. So you just took it? And what? Decided to manage it for me without mentioning it once. She shook her head. I wasn't stealing from you. Then what were you doing? I was protecting us, she said, her voice low and deliberate. You would have wasted it, Milo. On gadgets. Gear. Trips you'd never take. You don't plan. You live in the now. I was trying to be the grown-up. I laughed then, not because anything was funny, but because it was the only thing I could do that wasn't screaming. Wow. So this is what grown-up looks like? Lies? Deception? Secret accounts? She looked wounded. You're twisting it. No, Clarice, I said sharply. You did the twisting. You took my income and made it your secret weapon. You didn't just move the money, you redefined the rules of our marriage without telling me. She went quiet again. That silence she used when her next words had to be chosen like scalpel strokes. I did what I thought was best, she said finally. You wouldn't have understood the investment opportunities. I wanted us to be stable. And I didn't want to argue. You didn't want to argue, so you committed financial fraud? She winced. It wasn't fraud, wasn't it? I opened the folder, flipped to the page with her signature. Because this looks a lot like forgery. You signed off on internal bonuses under my name. You approved and processed every rerouted deposit. How is that not fraud? She took a shaky breath. Because we're married, Milo. It was all going toward us. Toward our future. But it didn't. My voice was cold now. None of that money ended up in our joint account. Not 1 cent. So tell me again how this was for us. She didn't answer. Not directly. She just looked down at the marble floor like it might open up and offer her a way out. It was in that moment that I understood this wasn't about the money at all. It never had been. This was about control. Clarice had always needed to be the one with the plan, the one in charge, the one holding the map while I just followed the trail. I let her have that role early on because I thought it made things easier. She was good with numbers, confident with spreadsheets. She liked structure. I liked trust. I thought we had both. Now I realized she'd been building something without me, something she didn't intend to share. The hallway door creaked open again. Mr. Greer stepped in. He didn't interrupt. He simply looked at me, then at Clarice, and then gave me a quiet nod. Would you like to speak privately? He asked. Clarice turned to him, startled. Mr. Greer, wait. There's no need. He held up a hand gently. This isn't for you, Clarice. It's for Milo. She looked at me, her face unreadable now. For the first time, I noticed just how polished her expressions had always been. She could wear guilt like perfume, apply it in just the right dose to suggest remorse without admitting fault. I nodded at Mr. Greer. Clarice stepped aside, brushing invisible lint from her sleeve. We'll talk later, she said. But I didn't respond. I didn't promise anything. Greer led me to the far end of the hallway and pushed open a private door that led into a small, glass-walled conference room. A bottle of untouched scotch sat on the side table. He motioned for me to sit. I did. He remained standing, folding his arms across his chest as he looked out the window toward the city skyline. You've been with Silvermore 6 years, Milo. Clean record. High efficiency ratings. Every department head trusts your numbers. I've never had a complaint. Thank you, I said, my voice dry. What happened out there wasn't just embarrassing, he continued. It raised flags. When a head accountant reroutes bonuses from an employee, her spouse no less, without transparency, it's not a personal issue anymore. It's a liability. I sat up straighter. I didn't know. I believe you. Samantha believes you too. But we need to be thorough. That's why I've called in the audit team. Not just to investigate the bonuses, but to look at every transaction Clarice has touched. I swallowed hard. How bad do you think it is? He looked at me finally. We don't know yet. But what we've seen so far, it's enough to place her on leave. Effective immediately. I leaned back in my chair. I should have felt relief, but I didn't. I felt numb. She'll fight it, I said quietly. He gave a slight smile. She can try. But numbers don't lie, Milo. People do. He paused, then placed a business card in front of me. This is a lawyer we've used for internal conflicts. Discreet. Ethical. If you need a personal consultation, I'd recommend him. I looked down at the card. The name read, Jared Knox. That hit something inside me. Jared. My friend from college. I hadn't spoken to him in years. But if Greer knew him, maybe this was fate offering me a rope. Thank you, I said. Greer nodded once. We'll handle the corporate side. You handle your own. He left me alone in the room for a while. I didn't touch the scotch. Didn't move. I just sat there, staring at the reflection of city lights on the window pane. Everything I thought I knew about my marriage, my finances, even my identity, it had been rewritten in the space of an hour. And as I sat there in that quiet, glass box, I made a decision. I wasn't going to wait for Clarice. Starting with the one place in the house she always guarded more than anything. Our safe. Mr. Greer's office was cleaner than I expected. No scattered files, no loose pins, no coffee-stained memos curled at the edges. Everything had a place. On his desk was a thin, silver-framed photo of his wife and 2 kids at what looked like a lake house. I stared at it for a moment as he closed the door behind us, locking it with a quiet but definitive click. The hum of the city vanished, leaving us in a bubble of stillness broken only by the software of the air conditioner and the ticking of a sleek analog clock on the wall. He didn't sit right away. Instead, he walked to the liquor tray on the side table and poured himself 2 fingers of something deep amber. "You want one?" he asked, glancing at me. I shook my head. I needed a clear mind, not one blurred with warmth and false calm. "No, thank you." He nodded, took a sip, then walked behind his desk and finally sat. For a long time, he just studied me, not judging, calculating, like he was trying to determine how deep I already knew I was in. When we first promoted Clarice to department head, he began. She was sharp, a problem solver, organized. She restructured some messy old systems that were eating time and money. He leaned back, but then she got too comfortable, or too confident, and no one pushed back. I said nothing. My hands were folded on my lap, gripping each other tightly. I wasn't here to defend her. I was here to understand what, exactly, I've been sleeping next to all these years. Greer slid a manila folder across the desk. "This is what we found so far." I opened it slowly. Inside were reports from our internal audit team, complete with annotations, timestamped login activity, and flagged transaction summaries. I didn't even recognize half the jargon at first glance, but the parts one could make sense of were damning. "She filed my tax returns?" I asked after scanning a page. "Yes," Greer replied. "It was all under her digital signature. We traced it through the company's tax assistance program. She opted you both in. Nothing illegal about that on the surface. Married couples filed jointly all the time." I kept reading. My eyes halted on the line that showed a deferred stock option being exercised. "Wait, this says I cashed in shares of my employee stock plan." "You didn't?" "No. I didn't even know I had one. Clarice told me it was a waste of time, said it was better to invest elsewhere." Greer's face didn't move. He was good at keeping calm, but his knuckles tensed slightly around his glass. "We pulled the routing info," he said. "That cash out went into an account registered under a personal trust with her name. Not yours." My throat tightened. "She forged that?" "Hard to say. You may have signed a blanket consent form early on without realizing. But the effect's the same. She moved money with your name and left you no trace of it." I looked back at the report. There were notations about 2 internal fund allocations, one in Q3 of the previous year, the other 6 months later. Both had been justified using internal memos that referenced my name, approvals supposedly backed by me to validate department bonus restructuring. She used my name to approve her own bonuses? I asked, not even trying to hide the disbelief. "Twice," Greer confirmed. "The second time, she even linked the performance gains back to logistics efficiencies, your department. It gave her the justification she needed to award herself an extra $8,000. My chest burned. Not because of the money, though that hurt, but because of the sheer strategy of it all. She had embedded herself in the system like a ghost, manipulating the numbers, using my credentials, reshaping the company's trust from the inside out. "This isn't just betrayal," I murmured. "It's fraud." Greer nodded. "And that's why she's being placed on immediate administrative leave, effective tonight. Her access has already been revoked." I closed the folder slowly and looked up. "What happens next?" "We conduct a full audit. Every transaction, every memo, every shared login and data authorization. If we find more, and we probably will, our legal department will get involved." He paused. "You're not in trouble, Milo. You're the victim in this. But I need your cooperation." He handed me a consent form. "This allows us to examine your Silvermore account activity, tax records, and all employer-related assets tied to your name." I signed it without hesitation. He gave a satisfied nod. "One more thing," he said. "Don't go home tonight expecting answers. Whatever Clarice tells you, remember, she didn't come clean. She got caught." I left the office half an hour later with a copy of the file under my arm, my mind rattling through every shared conversation, every moment I'd let her handle the finances with blind trust. It felt like my entire life had been built on foundationless sand. I didn't drive home right away. I sat in my car, parked on the far end of the lot where the light was dim and the night felt colder. My phone buzzed. A message from Clarice. "Can we please talk when you get back?" I didn't respond. When I finally walked into our house, the entryway light was on. She wasn't in the living room. No sign of her in the kitchen. Maybe she was upstairs, waiting. I didn't care. I went straight to the study. In the corner, tucked behind a filing cabinet, was our small beige fireproof safe. It wasn't high-tech. No fingerprint scan or retina recognition, just a basic numeric keypad. I hadn't opened it in years. Clarice always did. Birth certificates, property deeds, bank slips, she said it was easier that way. I never questioned it. I knelt and entered my first guess. Our anniversary. Rejected. Second guess. Our wedding date. Also rejected. Then I paused. Thought about the one date she always remembered, always mentioned with warmth, the date she used as a phone pin once when she forgot her own. I typed in her mother's birthday. Click. The lock released with a quiet clunk that felt like thunder in the stillness. I pulled the door open. Inside were neat stacks of folders, 2 portable hard drives, and an old checkbook I hadn't seen in years. I reached for the first folder and opened it. Investment accounts. Not 1, not 2, but 7 of them. Different banks. Different currencies. Some tied to her maiden name. Others routed through a trust labeled Harbor Light Holdings. None of them bore my name. The next folder held deeds, 2 properties. One in Charleston, the other in San Diego. Both listed under Clarice and someone named Mireille Lane. My heart dropped. Mireille, her sister. There was a third folder. A joint account in Clarice and Mireille's name, labeled Family Provisions. Inside were monthly wire confirmations. The amounts matched exactly the missing bonuses over the last 2 years. It wasn't just about hiding money. She had been building a structure, a life, one I wasn't part of. Maybe never meant to be. I sat back on the floor, the folder in my lap, staring at the tangled mess of facts, numbers, and betrayal. That's when I pulled out my phone and called the only person I could trust with this, Jared Knox. He picked up after the second ring. Milo, he said. It's been years. I need help, I said. Not later. Tonight. What's going on? I think my wife has been committing fraud. Financially. Professionally. Personally. I have files. Documents. I need you to look at them. He didn't hesitate. Text me your address. I'm on my way. Before I could hang up, he added, Milo, you're not overreacting. If anything, you're underreacting. I ended the call and looked back at the safe. Clarice had made herself the keeper of secrets. Now it was my turn to unlock every single one. I hadn't touched that safe in years. It was one of those things you don't think about until it's already too late. Like an attic door you never open or a box you assume is filled with old tax papers and forgotten receipts. In our house, the safe wasn't a place of secrets. At least, I never thought it was. Clarice always opened it. She always handled the serious stuff, as she used to say with a little wink. Like paying property taxes and filing W-2s was some thrilling espionage I wouldn't understand. I let her have it. Not out of laziness, but trust. Naive, unguarded trust. But that night, trust had already been hollowed out of me, and all that remained was suspicion and a growing, sick curiosity about the woman I had married. I knelt down in the study, staring at the beige box tucked neatly into its cabinet nook. It looked unassuming, dull even. Like something that held nothing more important than passports and warranty slips. But I knew better now. The keypad blinked at me, silently waiting. I tried our wedding date first. Rejected. I tried her birthday. Nothing. Then I tried the street number of our first apartment. Still no good. My fingers hovered over the buttons. I exhaled, trying to think like her. Not like a wife. Like an accountant with secrets. Then it hit me, her mother. The woman Clarice called every Sunday. The woman whose opinion she valued more than any therapist or friend. I typed in the numbers of her mother's birthday. Click. The lock released with a soft but definitive sound. Not loud, but it echoed in my head like a thunderclap. I pulled the handle and swung the door open. The inside was meticulously organized, of course. Rows of folders, neatly labeled in her precise handwriting. A few small boxes. An external hard drive. And at the back, a bound leather portfolio that looked far too expensive to be holding anything benign. I started with the folders. The first one was labeled Investment Statements. I flipped it open and immediately recognized none of the accounts. There were 7. 7. Across different institutions, some domestic, others overseas. Each had regular deposits, steady growth charts, and most notably, every one of them had her name. Just her name. Not a single account included mine. Not even the ones opened during our marriage. I searched for mentions of me, none. Just line after line of balanced ledgers, organized summaries, and financial projections. All healthy. All hidden. The second folder was labeled Property Holdings. That one stunned me. Two properties, one in Charleston, the other in San Diego. Both listed under Clarice's name, and one also included her sister Mireille as a co-owner. Rental income statements were tucked in the back, complete with tenant names, security deposits, and monthly revenue projections. This wasn't someone experimenting with investments. This was someone building a secondary life, one I was never meant to find. I kept digging. The third folder was the one that chilled me. It was labeled simply, HHA account. Inside were statements for a joint bank account held between Clarice and Mireille. I recognized the bank. We'd both used it before. But this account had never shown up on any of our joint statements. No linked cards. No online banking alerts. Just quiet, regular transfers. The amounts? Exactly $4,500. Monthly. Going back 2 years. The source account was Clarice's personal checking, the same one she had funneled my bonuses into. Every month, after the money hit her account, she would move it into this shared account with her sister. A new name on the transactions appeared frequently too. Harbor Light Holdings, a real estate LLC. My bonus money I hadn't even known existed, had become part of some quiet property empire I had nothing to do with. I wasn't just left out. I was erased. I stood up for a moment and paced the room, holding the file. I could feel my pulse in my ears, that high-pitched pressure that comes right before fury. Not the kind of fury that lashes out, but the kind that calcifies, that becomes cold, weaponized. My life wasn't just infiltrated by lies, it was rearranged behind my back, as if I were just an occupant of my own marriage, not a partner. I opened the leather portfolio next. Inside were handwritten notes, pages and pages of them. Financial strategies, loan applications, alternative tax filings. There was even a budget plan labeled Solo 2026 with expense columns, housing options, and a note in the margin that said, Mireille can manage Charleston. Should I do San Diego? Solo 2026. She had been planning an exit. 2 years from now, or maybe sooner if I hadn't discovered anything. She had structured her life to detach from me entirely. And not just emotionally. Financially. Legally. Socially. Every bonus I never saw. Every tax return she quietly signed. Every bank account hidden behind her polished smile. Was part of her escape. I picked up the hard drive last. It wasn't labeled. I walked it over to my laptop and plugged it in. Password protected. Of course it was. I closed it again. That wasn't something I could crack tonight, but I had someone who could. Jared. I grabbed my phone and texted him. You'll want to see this. Bring your forensics kit. His reply came back seconds later. On my way. I sat down, the folders spread out across the desk like a battlefield map. My marriage was a facade. A performance held together by routine and my misplaced faith. Clarice wasn't just managing finances. She was orchestrating a controlled demolition. One where I didn't notice until the floor gave way beneath me. The front door opened 30 minutes later. I expected Jared, but it was her. Clarice stood in the doorway, her keys in her hand, her purse still slung across her shoulder. She froze when she saw the folders laid out like evidence. Her eyes moved from me, to the open safe, to the leather binder, to the hard drive now blinking quietly in the port. You went through it, she said. Not with anger, not with fear, just quiet defeat. I nodded. I forgot the password. Then I remembered. She stepped forward. You shouldn't have. No, I said, cutting her off. You shouldn't have. You lied. You hid. You stole. And you planned to leave me while making sure I walked away with nothing. Her lips parted, as if she had a script ready. But this wasn't a boardroom or a negotiation table. I wasn't going to be reasoned into silence. I continued. You didn't just reroute bonuses, Clarice. You rerouted trust. You took everything we built together and turned it into your contingency plan. Her voice broke for the first time. Milo, I didn't know how to tell you. Tell me what? That you decided I didn't need access to my own money? That you used my name to award yourself bonuses? That you bought properties without even mentioning them? She looked at the Charleston deed. It wasn't like that. Then tell me what it was like. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you were engineering a quiet divorce, one where I didn't even get the courtesy of a heads up. Her jaw clenched. It was never about not loving you. I laughed bitterly. No, it was about outgrowing me, wasn't it? You decided you were the one with the vision, the strategy, the escape hatch. And I was just the guy bringing home bonuses he didn't know about. We stood in silence. The only sound was the faint hum of my laptop, the hard drive spinning quietly in its port. I talked to Jared, I said. He's coming over. I need someone I can trust to help me sort this out. Legally, financially, all of it. She swallowed. You're involving a lawyer? You involved lawyers the moment you used my name on bonus reports and opened accounts I couldn't see. The moment you plotted a future without me and funded it with money I earned. I didn't mean to hurt you, she whispered. I stared at her. But you did. We didn't speak again. She turned and walked upstairs without a word. I didn't follow. 15 minutes later, Jared arrived. I let him in, handed him the folders, and pointed to the hard drive. He got to work immediately, quiet, focused. As I sat beside him, something inside me shifted. This wasn't panic anymore. This wasn't heartbreak. It was resolve. She forgot that I had a memory too, that I could learn, that I could act, and that the man she underestimated was now the one holding the truth. The safe had been hers. But now, every secret inside it belonged to me. The first week after the discovery was the hardest. Not because I didn't see it coming. At that point, I had seen enough to understand the depth of Clarice's deception, but because everything that came after was clinical, clean, procedural. It's one thing to uncover betrayal in your home, but another entirely to watch strangers dissect it under fluorescent lights and formal memos. The audit began on Monday. By Wednesday, they were calling it a pattern. Samantha Baird, Silvermore's HR director, called me into a small conference room just before lunch. She had that same expression she wore the night of the dinner, carefully blank, like she was trying to break bad news without giving it too much emotion. We're finding consistencies, she said, sliding a printed packet across the table. Multiple small discrepancies across departmental reimbursements over the past 2 years. I flipped through it. Clarice's name appeared again and again. Travel cost rounded down by just enough to avoid notice, with the remaining balance rerouted into generic internal accounts. On their own, the amounts were insignificant. $50 here, $80 there. But over months, years, it built up to tens of thousands. When paired with the bonuses she rerouted under my name, the strategy became clear. She built a siphon, I said aloud. Samantha nodded. It was surgical. Small enough to pass through compliance. Just large enough to feed into personal channels. She folded those excess funds into quarterly investment withdrawals, strategically timed. I swallowed hard. And you're sure I'm not implicated? We reviewed every login, every authorization path. You never signed anything beyond standard onboarding paperwork. She used your name, but not your access. That's important. My mind wandered back to the tax returns she filed, the investment statements in the safe, the silent properties I never knew existed. What does this mean for her? There will be consequences, Samantha said carefully. We've already placed her on unpaid leave. Legal is preparing to move forward with formal charges. If she cooperates, it may stay civil. If not, she didn't finish. She didn't need to. What struck me most wasn't the fraud. It was the ease. Clarice didn't panic. Not once during our marriage did she show any sign that she was juggling multiple accounts, falsifying internal ledgers, and siphoning company money. It was like she'd trained herself to do it with a smile. Her family didn't help. The moment word spread, because somehow, it always does, her sister Mireille sent a scathing text to my phone. You're making this worse for her. You were always jealous of her success. I didn't respond. I couldn't. What do you even say to that? Calls came in from her cousins. Her aunt. Even her old friend Danielle, who once told me, Clarice makes power look effortless. They all repeated versions of the same thing. It's just money. You're blowing it out of proportion. No, it wasn't just money. It was deception disguised as structure. Control masquerading as love. Every time she told me, don't worry, I've got the bills covered, she was saying, you don't need to know. I stayed silent through those early days not because I didn't have anything to say, but because I wanted the truth to speak louder than my outrage. So I filed. Legal separation. Not a delay tactic. A statement. W. She blinked, maybe expecting me to add something more. But there was nothing left to explain. I moved into a short-term rental the following week. A studio with creaky floors and no dishwasher, but it was mine. Mine, with no hidden documents in the walls or dual-key safes I couldn't open. Jared came by that first night with takeout and a bottle of decent whiskey. He didn't say much, just handed me a manila envelope with the next steps and quietly ate beside me as I unpacked boxes. You're not broken, he said as he left. You're clean. And you're dangerous now. That stuck with me. Clean and dangerous. Not in a vengeful way, but in a clear-headed, I see it all now way. I didn't have to scream to be strong. I just had to be still long enough to let the truth settle. Clarice had built her empire in whispers. I was building my peace in daylight. I stopped answering her sister's calls. Blocked Danielle. Removed myself from the Hawthorne family group chat that Clarice had dragged me into when we first got married. I thought there'd be sadness in cutting ties, but there wasn't. Just space. Finally, space. I went back to work after 2 weeks. Mr. Greer welcomed me with a simple nod and a line I didn't forget. People think betrayal ruins people, but it clarifies them. He was right. Clarice hadn't just lost a job. She lost something more permanent, my belief in her. And there was no audit form or statement of remorse that could restore that. I didn't tell anyone else about the properties or the investments. That was between me, my lawyer, and whatever court proceedings came next. Let her explain that portfolio when the subpoenas hit. Let her map out her solo 2026 plan in front of a judge. For now, I was quiet. But that quiet wasn't weakness. It was preparation. The first day in court didn't feel like justice. It felt like performance. The courthouse smelled like old paper and metal polish, and the courtroom itself was colder than I expected, pale gray walls, worn carpeting, and the constant shuffle of attorneys who looked like they hadn't smiled in weeks. Clarice arrived 20 minutes early, dressed in a soft gray suit, her hair in the same immaculate bun she wore to investor briefings. She looked polished, calm, and, infuriatingly, like someone who still thought she had control. Her lawyer was a tall, sharp-faced woman named Tamara Quinn. The kind who makes silence feel like an accusation. Jared leaned toward me when he saw her. She's a scorched earth type. Doesn't blink unless she's certain you're about to. I gave a nod and tried not to watch Clarice too much, but it was impossible. This was the same woman who used to fall asleep on my shoulder watching documentaries. The same woman who once cried over a broken teacup from her grandmother. And yet here she was, cool as ice, facing the bench like she was there to negotiate terms instead of face consequences. The judge was a woman in her late 50s, with tired eyes and no tolerance for games. Her name was Judge Fairchild, and I remember thinking that her name was too perfect for the moment. She called the session to order, her voice clear, firm, and entirely unimpressed with both parties. "Let's be efficient," she said. "This court has no patience for petty drama wrapped in financial smokescreens." Tamara stood and opened with a defense that sounded almost rehearsed. My client was operating in the interest of household stability. While the financial decisions may not have been transparent, they were not made with malicious intent. I looked at Clarice. She kept her hands folded, her expression unreadable. But I could see the pulse in her neck. Rapid. Jared rose slowly. He didn't bring flair. He brought facts. He placed a folder on the table, flipped it open, and began walking the judge through the documents. "What you'll see here, Your Honor, is a pattern, one that spans 4 fiscal quarters and involves unauthorized rerouting of corporate bonuses, misrepresented tax filings, and misuse of company resources under a shared household pretense that was, in reality, a singular funnel. The defendant not only rerouted income, she manipulated systems." The judge skimmed the pages. "And the plaintiff was unaware?" "Completely," Jared replied. "Until the night it was revealed publicly, in front of their CEO and HR director. And we have the forensic audit to support every discrepancy." Judge Fairchild glanced up. "Mrs. Hartford, do you dispute any of this documentation?" Clarice didn't speak at first. Her lawyer nudged her subtly. She cleared her throat. I don't dispute the transfers, but I believed I was acting in the best interest of our shared financial future." The judge's tone sharpened. "That's not the question. Did you intentionally hide these financial assets from your husband for personal gain?" There it was. The question. The one that split everything in two. Clarice looked down at her hands. She didn't speak. The silence stretched. Everyone waited. Even the court reporters stopped typing for a beat. Then Jared handed the judge a flash drive. "We'd like to enter a video exhibit into evidence. It's a recording of a Silvermore internal training seminar led by the defendant." The screen above the judge flickered to life. Clarice's voice came through clear, confident, even playful. She stood at the front of a white-walled conference room, speaking to a group of junior accountants. "Now, here's the real trick," she said, smiling, arms crossed. "If you're smart, you'll learn the gaps in the bonus structure. Most people don't pay attention to quarterly logs. It's easy to reroute bonuses if you know who's not watching. Just make sure they don't check the deposit trail." The room in the video laughed. The room in the courtroom didn't. The judge paused the video. Her expression didn't change, but the atmosphere shifted like a storm was about to break. So, she said slowly, not only did you hide financial assets, you also instructed others on how to do so? Clarice finally looked up. It was a joke. I was trying to keep the session light. Stop. The judge's voice was final. She turned to the clerk. Place that exhibit into official record. Effective immediately, the plaintiff is granted sole access to all shared marital financial holdings pending further ruling. And Mrs. Hartford, she said, narrowing her eyes, we are escalating this from civil to potential criminal misrepresentation. You'll be hearing from the district attorney's office. Clarice looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw it, her first crack. Not anger, not even sadness. Shock, as if I'd somehow become someone she hadn't planned for. After court adjourned, she tried to approach me in the hallway. Milo, wait, she said. I didn't stop. She stepped into my path. This isn't who you are. I looked her dead in the eye. You're right. This is who I had to become because of who you turned out to be. She blinked, stepping back. I walked away. I didn't gloat. I didn't celebrate. I just kept walking out the double doors, into the crisp air, and toward the version of my life where truth finally had weight. And control? That was mine now. The first thing I did after the court ruling was change banks. I walked into the branch where Clarice and I had opened our first joint account all those years ago, and this time, I didn't just ask to add a beneficiary or adjust permissions. I closed every shared account with her name on it. The banker, a kind older woman named Patrice, wore a nervous smile when I handed her my ID and the court order. Going solo? She asked gently. Finally, I said. She typed for a while, double-checked everything, and when the last account was officially closed, she printed the confirmation and handed it to me like a badge of honor. I folded it carefully and slid it into my wallet. I'd opened a new account the night before, just mine, with no linked names, no authorized users, and no digital shadows. It wasn't about hiding money. It was about reclaiming identity. For the first time in 7 years, my finances were under my eyes alone. No filters, no misdirection, no rerouted trails. Just me. Then I moved out. I didn't need a mansion or some symbolic penthouse suite. I found a modest loft on the East End, near the waterfront. It had high ceilings, tall windows, and the smell of fresh paint still clinging to the baseboards. The floor creaked when I walked barefoot, and the pipes made noise at night. But it was mine. Entirely mine. Every box I carried in felt like a silent declaration. I survived that. I came through it. I didn't take much from the old house. A few clothes, a framed picture of my late father, some books. I left the rest behind, not because it wasn't valuable, but because it carried her fingerprints. I didn't want a single thing she'd chosen. Not the dishes, not the towels, not even the curtains she once argued so passionately for. It's strange how physical things absorb betrayal. You can look at a lamp and remember a lie. Silvermore reached out a few days later. Samantha called. We know this has been a lot, she said, but there's something you should see. I assumed it was more paperwork or another HR form, but when I arrived at the office, she was holding a letter in a sealed envelope. It's Clarice's resignation, she said. I blinked. She resigned. Samantha nodded. Dated 11 months ago. It was in our draft system but never submitted. It's strange. I opened the envelope. It was written in her usual crisp, polite tone, thanking the company for their support, mentioning a desire to pursue private consulting. The date stamped in the header was almost a year prior to the dinner party. She was planning to leave before any of this came out, I said aloud. Samantha gave a dry smile. Looks that way. But then she stayed. Collected bonuses. Restructured payouts. I leaned back in the chair. That resignation letter, just sitting there, meant she had been laying the groundwork for a clean exit long before anything went public. A life without me. A future without this job. She just hadn't figured out how to leave without losing control. She stayed to finish the plan, I murmured. Samantha nodded. Or maybe she stayed because she didn't think anyone would catch on. I took the letter home with me and burned it. I didn't need it as evidence. I needed it gone. Symbolic closure, maybe. Or just the comfort of watching her words finally vanish into smoke. The loft became a quiet space. At first, the silence was jarring. I'd spent years filling my life with shared calendars, financial planning sessions, muted TV shows while she worked spreadsheets beside me. Now it was just stillness. I didn't mind. My mornings became slow, intentional. I made coffee and read actual books, not strategy memos. I cooked badly at first. Burnt toast, overcooked rice. But I kept at it. There was peace in learning how to take care of myself again. Not out of necessity, but because I wanted to. I declined Silvermore's offer to lead a compliance workshop. Mr. Greer said I'd be perfect. Said I had insight no textbook could offer. But I needed time away. I didn't want to teach yet. I wanted to breathe. Some evenings, I'd walk along the waterfront, headphones in, watching the lights reflect off the bay. There was something grounding about that, how the city just kept moving, unaware that my world had imploded and reassembled in quiet, deliberate ways. Then came the call from Jared. She's agreed to a financial split, he said. But her lawyer is requesting a meeting to discuss the division of assets. I was already shaking my head before he finished. I don't need anything from her. You're entitled to it. I know. But I'm not building my life on her leftovers. There was a pause on the line. You're sure? I'm sure. And I was. Because this wasn't about winning anymore. It wasn't about revenge. It was about sovereignty. I didn't want a dollar that carried her fingerprints. I'd rather start from zero with peace than inherit a fortune wrapped in manipulation. One night, I sat on the floor of my loft, surrounded by the sound of a rainstorm hammering the windows, and thought about the version of me who used to believe love and trust were the same thing. That if someone handled your life for you, it was a sign of care, not control. That version of me didn't exist anymore. And I didn't miss him. Now, when I looked in the mirror, I saw someone sharper. Not angry, but awake. Someone who had learned, slowly and painfully, that clarity is a gift, even when it comes wrapped in loss. Clarice's name used to be tied to mine on everything, documents, tax forms, property titles. No, it wasn't on my lease. Not on my bank account. Not on my future. That name used to hold weight. Now, it was just a detail in a chapter one no longer lived in. My name, Milo Hartford, was finally mine again. It was raining the night she showed up. That cold, needling kind of rain that seeped into your collar and made everything feel heavier. I heard the knock before I saw her, 3 slow taps against the metal frame of my loft's glass door. I wasn't expecting anyone, let alone her. Clarice stood there, soaked, her hair plastered to her face, mascara streaking beneath her eyes. No umbrella. No coat. Just her and the storm. I opened the door but didn't speak. Can I explain? She asked, her voice cracking. I stepped aside wordlessly. She walked in, dripping water onto the hardwood, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. Not polished. Not composed. Just wet, tired, and desperate. She sat on the edge of the armchair and wrapped her arms around herself. I panicked, she began. I felt like you were slipping away. That I had to keep everything together, even if it meant doing it alone. I stayed standing. You weren't alone. You made yourself alone. She nodded slowly. I thought if I controlled things, I could protect us. I finally looked at her, really looked. If I hadn't found out, would you have told me? Silence. Not hesitation. Silence. She looked down, then to the window, then at the floor. That was my answer. I reached for the umbrella leaning near the door and handed it to her. She looked up, startled. You need to go, I said gently. No shouting. No curses. Just the sound of rain behind us and the quiet understanding that there was nothing left to fix. She stood slowly, took the umbrella like it weighed more than it should, and walked back out into the storm without another word. And I stood there for a moment longer, letting the door close behind her. Sometimes, closure isn't loud. It's just clarity. They always called it a performance bonus, $4, $500 for exceeding quarterly benchmarks. But the truth is, I never got the bonus that changed everything. Not the money, not the recognition. I got the silence. I got the edited version of my own success, filtered through someone else's control. Clarice made sure of that. She didn't just reroute payments. She rerouted my confidence. For years, I believed stability was something I owed to the person who managed our accounts, balanced the budget, and filed our taxes. I didn't think I needed to know everything, just enough. She counted on that. Now, I count everything. It started slowly rebuilding, I mean. You don't wake up one day and feel whole again. It doesn't work like that. You wake up still angry, still sad, still wondering if maybe you should have seen it earlier, caught a hint in her tone, questioned a few more receipts. But then, one morning, you make breakfast without looking at your phone. And that feels like a victory. Then you read a book and finish it. You fix your own leaky faucet without calling a plumber. You learn your bank routing number by heart. You open your own mail and actually read it. Small things, but they add up. I started a small firm 6 months after the separation was finalized. Not a flashy one. No marble floors or sliding glass doors. Just a modest office above a tailor shop and a coffee machine that worked when it felt like it. I called it Hartford Consulting. Straightforward. Unapologetic. We help employees understand compensation structures, bonuses, retirement accounts. We translate the fine print, the stuff too many people skip past. We specialize in relationships where one partner handles everything. You'd be surprised how many people sit across from me and say, I didn't think I needed to ask. They ask now, and I help them find what was always theirs. I remember my first client, a woman named Layla who'd worked at her company for 9 years without realizing she had earned merit bonuses every spring, deposits that went straight into her husband's account. I thought he was just generous, she said, crying in the same chair where I once read Clarice's resignation letter. Turns out, he was giving me what I had already earned. I didn't have to say much. I just listened. Sometimes, that's enough. That's the bonus I give myself now. Not the money. The clarity. The peace of sitting in a chair with someone who thinks they're broken and watching them realize they're not. Silvermore reached out again a few weeks ago. Mr. Greer invited me back to host a seminar on internal ethics. You're living proof, he said, and more credible than any compliance officer we've hired. I said yes. Not because I wanted applause, but because I understood now what I hadn't before. Knowing the system isn't enough. You have to teach it to others. You have to break the illusion that ignorance is safety. The room was packed. Mostly new hires, a few older staffers who still remembered the fallout. I stood at the front of the same conference room where Clarice once taught accountants how to hide bonuses. I looked out at them and said, if someone tells you not to worry about the details, worry harder. They listened. And afterward, a woman from accounting came up to me and said, you made it through something most people would collapse under. I smiled and told her the truth. I did collapse. Quietly. Privately. Then I rebuilt. That's what no one tells you about survival. It doesn't roar. It steadies. It shows up in routines and boundaries and the quiet way you no longer flinch when the mail arrives. I haven't seen Clarice since the night she stood in the rain with mascara streaked down her face. I don't track her court dates. Don't look her up on social media. Don't ask mutual friends how she's doing. That chapter ended with the turn of a lock and the silence of an umbrella slipping into the night. Let her live in the space she carved out of lies. I'm living in the one I built from truth. One morning, I found myself back at La Rouse, the restaurant where it all started. Not to eat. Just passing by. The window was still clean, the lighting still warm. For a second, I pictured that table again, her in that navy dress, Mr. Greer raising his glass, the quiet storm that started with 7 words. Is the $4,500 monthly bonus treating you well? It wasn't a question. It was a trigger. And now, months later, I can finally answer it. Yes, the bonus didn't buy me freedom, but it woke me up. And in that awakening, I found everything she tried to bury. I found me.